The weather finally going to cool off a little bit. I had to break down after removing an AC unit from the living room window. And of course, it came with all of this weather stripping on it, but the weather stripping was gone. I had to reinstall it a few days ago, but I had to find alternatives to the weather stripping. So a lot of people walking by suddenly thought they were in the middle of Appalachia because, well, it's just one of those situations. Unit still works, but a little cardboard and some cloth and everything else filled that role. But now I think we're done for a while with the really hot weather, and I get to remove that. And I just want to bring that up because we've been telling you all summer about Tint Lady. In fact, they do window tintings, and that helps cut down on the heat coming through the windows. But a lot of you may be thinking, well, tell you what, now that it's winter, maybe I want that heat coming through. Well, still, you'll get that even with window tinting. But the thing is, window tinting can give you privacy 12 months out of the year, cold weather and warm weather. It also will protect from the sun's bleaching effect all of the cloth you have in the house, whether it be your drapes, your carpet, which, well, calling it cloth might be a stretch, depends on who your carpet maker is, I suppose, and your furniture, which can be bleached by the rays from the sun. So we would like to recommend that you get a free estimate from Tint Lady, and you can call and schedule an appointment, the number 736-8469, or go online, tintladyidaho.com. Now, these people have nearly a quarter century of experience in the business locally. They have an office at 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only, closed on Sundays. And remember, don't squint, get tint. So there was a great story I happened to see in the Idaho Press Tribune over the weekend, and AP has picked it up. Benito was mentioning it earlier this morning during AM Idaho. A LeGrand man is hoping to start a movement for Eastern Oregon to join. Oregon is actually the pronunciation, I'm told, by someone who grew up there. Just because it has an O-N at the end, it should be an U-N when you pronounce it. Not like United Nations, but an UN. They're looking to join Idaho, according to this story. This is coming out of a dateline of Pendleton, Oregon. Residents in Eastern Oregon and Washington have discussed breaking away from their more liberal neighbors to form a new state for years, but a new twist has been added to the conversation. Why form a new state when the rural counties could just join Idaho instead? And there was a map included on the website when I was looking at this story, which would make Idaho, it almost looks like a mirror image from one side to the next. And fascinating to look at this. Now, you'd have a great deal of resistance in the State House in Olympia, as well as in Oregon, too. It says, according to 2014 data from the U.S. Census Bureau, Idaho currently has a little over 1.6 million people. But that would rise to 3.6 million if all 17 Oregon counties east of Hood River County and the 20 Washington counties east of King County jump ship. So the state of Idaho would well more than double if something like that happened. And you say to yourself, well, that's not going to happen. It's always fun to talk about these things, and I've lived in other places. A number of years ago, some folks in Colorado were talking about seceding from the rest of the liberal state. In Maryland, there were 4 or 5 counties in the western part of the state that wanted to secede and join West Virginia. All of the liberal newspaper columnists in Baltimore at the time were saying, go ahead, good riddance. Yeah, well, the people in those counties felt the same way about you. Don't worry. Fact of the matter is, I was talking about Hillary Clinton in the last segment of the program. Some years ago, when she was still serving as Secretary of State, she gave a speech, and she was talking about various people who live in that Caucasus region in southern Russia, and you have some other entities there too as well. You've got there's a country called Azerbaijan, there's a country called Armenia, and there's this small separatist area called, look, I don't know why they call it this. Apparently when place names were being handed out, they were in the back of the line. It's called Nagorno-Karabakh, which I don't know what that translates to, but it means I have a sore throat, I think. These people wanted their liberty. They wanted to break away from the Azerbaijanis and the Armenians, but they were involved in a war. And Hillary Clinton said, people should have the right to self-determination. Funny, that wasn't the way it was done in this country back in the 1860s, but to liberals today, if you're talking about some other part of the world, it's okay. But I don't think that liberals would support losing half of these 2 states to Idaho. In other words, it's good for the Nagorno-Karabakhis, or whatever they're known as, but it's not good for Oregonians or for Washingtonians. It's only good for people in other parts of the world, not necessarily good for people here. And there's a vote in Catalonia in Spain. And in other words, the people who live there would like to separate. And the reason we have a lot of Basque people here in Idaho is because they couldn't get their independence from the Spanish as well. Well, if the going feeling is people should control their own destiny, then why not let it be done? If someone living in that part, if the culture is the same, the political views are the same, let them come. Simply redraw the lines. A lot of these lines were drawn. It's like looking at big cities nowadays. Big cities, they put a boundary up and they said this is the city, and then the city grows in odd-long or oblong ways, and before you know it, it resembles, the population center may not resemble anything like what's on the original map. And you've got to start recognizing that. It's a bit like being in the Twin Falls area, where you can go out certain ends of town and realize that's where all the growth is, versus other areas of town. And so, therefore, you've got to start recognizing this. You can't necessarily run under old models. I do believe that we're living in a time in this country where normally this type of discussion would be nothing more than a parlor game. But the direction that the country is going, I'll tell you what, I could see this seriously happening, where this, within 10 years, we'll be redrawing a lot of the map throughout the United States. Hey, we've got a few minutes left before we wrap up today. Bill Colley with you. I want to share a little bit of that John Boehner, Ted Cruz spat with you coming up. Have a brief explanation here as to why there was a change in venue for Pastor Shahram Hadian's appearance tonight. And it has been moved to Eastside Baptist in Twin Falls on Eastland Drive, 7 o'clock tonight. The reason that has happened is because apparently the church where this was to take place in Buell decided at the last minute to pull out. I wonder who came along with the 30 pieces of silver there. Somehow a little political pressure is all you need to do to get some people to suddenly lose faith. 944, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 55. Thank you for joining us this morning. Coming up Wednesday on the show between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we are going to be joined by the good folks from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, which is located on Fillmore Street directly across from the main post office. Dr. Jonathan Tripp will not be here tentatively. In fact, we'll be joined by Russell Singleton, physician assistant. Russell is no longer going to be alone as a PA over there because the office is growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, we should tell you that. Due to the growth of the office, they are still looking for new patients. And in fact, the office is expected to continue to grow. So if you're new to town or you're thinking about switching physicians and you're looking for someone who has a more family-friendly approach, and perhaps it's less like the assembly line that you see with a lot of healthcare today, or you'd like to have a doctor who can see you within 24 hours sometimes if you have an illness or you have a need to see that doctor instead of waiting 3 weeks for your doctor to find some space on the schedule, you might want to think about switching to Tripp Family Medicine. We'll have a discussion this week coming up between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. We do this every week with those good folks. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. Ted Cruz got called a jackass over the weekend by the retiring Speaker of the House of Representatives, who is known as John Boehner, who was once described by one of Hillary Clinton's allies as a louche, which means a bit of a rogue, and as a drunk and a nicotine addict. Ted Cruz, apparently none of those things, but he thinks that Republican leadership in both the House and Senate is weak.
The reason people are so frustrated out of their minds with Washington is, as conservatives, we keep winning elections, and the people who we elect don't do what they said they would do. If either John Boehner or Mitch McConnell would stand up and lead, would defend the conservative principles we were elected to defend, I would be the first one to celebrate them, to praise them.
Ted Cruz speaking. Reporters caught up with him from Fox and Friends, and that's him sharing some thoughts on this. There was a chairman. He's the chairman of the Republican Party in Louisiana. He, along with the governor of his state, Bobby Jindal, have both said it's time for Mitch McConnell to quit as well, and that they need new leadership, fresh leadership in Washington, simply because these people are so incredibly out of touch with the people who voted for them. And they've made numerous promises which they don't keep. You hear them say, well, you can't do this because. John Boehner has been making that argument over the last several days. Most of you, I'm sure, think that he is full of, we won't go there. But John Boehner, this is a story that came across the Fox news feed this morning.
John Boehner didn't mince words while talking about the uncompromising demands of the conservative wing of the party, calling them absolutely unrealistic during an interview on CBS's Face the Nation.
We got groups here in town, members of the House and Senate here in town, who whip people into a frenzy believing that they can accomplish things that they know are never going to happen.
I'm going to cut that off right there for a very good reason. I believe we have a telephone caller with us. And number two, Mr. Boehner and his fellow Republican leaders, why then did they promise all of these things if they knew they couldn't deliver? You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story. No, you're not. Somebody bagged it. Shame to hear that sound. It's one of the saddest sounds in talk radio. You're on the air at 9:47. What's on your mind?
Yeah, unrealistic in their frame of mind in that cesspool of Washington, D.C. You know, when you're swimming in crap, you get used to it, I guess, huh? You know, apparently, you know, when I'm in dirty water, I don't like to stay in it. I usually get out, or I don't ever get in it in the first place. Hey, one more thing. You know, when you're emotional like this with Boehner, you know, there's evidence that he's an alcoholic. And so, you know, I don't know. I don't know if you know about that or not, and you can expand on that if you want. I'll hang up. Thanks.
Yes. In fact, John Boehner is he's a vinophile. Is that how they pronounce that? He's a connoisseur of all sorts of various wines. You do know that he grew up in a bar. His father was a tavern owner, and he's a nicotine addict as well. So he's an addictive personality. He whines that he can't play golf with his buddy President Obama. So yeah, the man has some issues like that in his life. It's a shame to see that it's come to this, because there was some real potential when the Republicans took not only the House but the Senate to do something revolutionary. And these guys didn't do it. And now they want us to, well, they know they've got allies in media. Remember, they didn't like Boehner when he invited Netanyahu to speak to a joint session of Congress. How dare he? Why, he's nothing but a Nazi. Oh, excuse me, he's invited a Jew. Yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm a liberal. He's a Nazi. Again, you know, the leftist logic that comes into all of this. And then as soon as the man says, I quit because I can't stand working with all of these conservatives, gosh, that poor John Boehner, what a sweet man he was. And since most of your people in media are falling down drunks too, they feel some kinship with the guy. 9:49. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 and newsradio1310.com. I've got this just quickly before we get to Mike Gallagher. Headline from Media Research Center's Newsbusters. Chris Matthews said that the modern GOP is pro-white, Mormon, and conservative. And you've got a complaint with that for what reason? I'm pro-everybody. That includes white. He once called Southerners yahoos on the air, but that was okay because, well, they're Southerners. We've got Mike Gallagher brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls, 736-6563. I'll need some Pradosec before that's all done. Maybe the prescription one, too, as well. 9:54, Bill Colley with you on Top Story, wrapping up today. God willing, the creek don't rise. They allow me to do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. I have a couple of quick things to note. You've got the screaming memes in this community saying that it's the right thing to do when it comes to resettling people here whose backgrounds we know nothing about, who are coming from a war-torn area which is peppered with terrorists, because it's the right thing to do. Since they all have these theology degrees at your local newspaper and the like. Here you go. Why then, if it's the right thing to do and it's because it benefits someone else, why do they continue to support infanticide? Why is it establishment media seems to think that's okay? Because, you know, over at your local newspaper, I guess if they had to help you deliver the baby, they would just say, hey, you push while I stomp. This is Carly Fiorina. She was on Meet the Press yesterday with Chuck Todd. Boy, he's a sort of a macho-looking type, isn't he? She was on, in fact, I think Carly's more macho than he is. She was being questioned about her stand against Planned Parenthood. And again, Mitch McConnell, Jim DeMint said today from the Heritage Foundation, formerly of the U.S. Senate, said that McConnell is just delaying on Planned Parenthood, so by the time they get to the Christmas recess, they can say, oh, we got to go home, and nothing will be done on that matter. Once again, lying to the constituency because they can or they think they can. So this is Carly Fiorina speaking yesterday about why she believes that we should do it and do it now.
Taxpayers are funding this activity. And not only that, not only are taxpayers having to fund this butchery, but Planned Parenthood doles out millions of dollars every single election cycle to Democrat candidates. This is a political slush fund on top of being butchery that Americans, again, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, cannot support.
I wouldn't be very proud to be a Democrat if it means that my party is in power because it gets money from people who dice up little babies. It would seem to me that if I hoped at the end of this life to go on to eternity, I would prefer to spend eternity in heaven versus my ass burning off in hell. I can't find any other nicer way to put that. And yet they still go along and then they claim, well, but these videos from Planned Parenthood are heavily edited. Ignoring again the fact that TV news stories are edited. And she's responding to that.
They're trying to distract the American people from the hideous reality that Planned Parenthood is aborting fetuses alive to harvest their brains and other body parts. That is a fact. Planned Parenthood will not and cannot deny this because it is happening. It is happening in this nation, and taxpayers are paying for it.
Do you out there, you Democrats who monitor the program, do you have any conscience left whatsoever? Again, you tell us we should bring people here whether or not they're terrorists. I guess what? So they can kill more of our children? What is it that why are you so, enraptured by the thought that we have to go around torturing and killing little babies? Why are you drooling over that possibility? What kind of people raised you? And how have you become so desensitized to this terrible, terrible violence? That you stand by it and you back it up and you dig in and you say, no, we're not giving up on this one. Do you think that you will someday have to answer to God? I've heard this comment before. I used to know a woman. She went out with one of my friends. He was a very conservative Roman Catholic and she was a very liberal Protestant. And I'm not saying that that's the case with all Protestants. It's just her background. She lives now over in Reno. But she used to make the argument. She worked for a family planning outfit which promoted abortion, and she used to say, you guys never sit here and ask yourselves, what's going to happen to these children if they're born? What kind of lives are they going to have? Well, that's the thing. We don't know. I don't know what I'm having for breakfast yet tomorrow. But I prefer to be able to choose tomorrow morning without having someone suck out my brains tonight before I get to the breakfast table. That is all for today. Rush Limbaugh is scheduled after the news at 10 o'clock from Fox. Sean Hannity after 1 o'clock news from Fox. Glenn Beck following 4 o'clock news from Fox. And Dave Ramsey following Fox News at 7 o'clock tonight.